Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 devs want it to be the best game in the history of video games. So the development and production team of this conclusion to the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy clearly have high expectations for this title, and they want it to be as good as it can be. This is a theme I've talked about more on the channel, but when you have something that's incredibly, incredibly good, following that up becomes increasingly difficult to do. You know, the idea that like things will come together in a development cycle in such a way to produce something, not only once with Remake was great, but Rebirth, which was like even better, right? And there are problems with Remake. Like, I think Rebirth is the better game. I think they fixed some of the issues. The fact that they made it open world, the fact that the soundtrack, the visuals, the combat, right? I mean, with like the combat and the engine and stuff, that one was kind of already from the first game, but the fact that everything else that went into it as well, along with, you know, the graphical upgrade and the game being just generally running pretty well, is kind of phenomenal. Plus the setting, the characters, the dialogue, right? All of it. And people have their opinions about the dialogue and some of the voice acting.
The remake's voice acting is stuck in this mysterious limbo zone. It's not robot mode, but it's not good either. Characters can be convincing at times, but then ruin the illusion with their horrible anime grunting.
The mayor. Hey, shush, I'm on the phone. The mayor.
Huh? What about the mayor?
I think it's some of the best voice acting in video games. Video games, especially ones like this, where you have, however many lines of dialogue, right? A lot of dialogue in a game like this, where it's story-based and does incorporate a lot of it. It's extremely impressive. I'm not one of those people that's going to be like, I'm all about graphics, I'm all about what's impressive, right? But I do put weight on it, right? I think that when there is something that is genuinely beautiful and shows craftsmanship, and you know that there was a lot of effort and grit put into it, and it's not just like, oh, they did put a lot of effort into it. It's like, no, you can see it, you can hear it, you're experiencing it as you play it. That's kind of what Rebirth did for me, right? It had all of those things, right? It was a fun game, extremely impressive, right? The story was... I've always liked how they have the option to kind of blaze through it, but you can also do all this other side stuff. I mean, all of the extra little like mini games and like quests that you can go on, yeah, there aren't like that many of them. But in my first playthrough, I put like 100 hours into it, right? And that was, I think, just a pretty normal like run-of-the-mill playthrough. Like 100 hours in a game that is this high fidelity, where a lot of it is animated cutscenes, which people will complain about the cutscenes, but just think about the fact that they have to animate all that and then have it seamlessly transition into gameplay. A lot of it is in-engine, right? And it's not even like you're walking around the open world the entire time. You might be walking around the overworld like half the time, but a lot of the time even less than that. In a good portion of the game, you're actually in the main story parts. The section where you're in, what's it called? The Junon section was absolutely incredible, right? Just that entire area had so much care and effort put into it. And I don't even think I explored every part of that. And in every little area, there's like parts where you can go and talk to the people in there, right? It was just amazing. Just that area alone. And then the gold saucer, oh my God. Like, just those two parts alone were enough for a $60 $70, right, exclusive. But they went above and beyond and gave you an entire experience with all this other stuff and all these other mechanics anyway, and the game is genuinely still fun to play. They kind of left it a little bit open at the end. It's not exactly clear what was part of Cloud's imagination or Cloud's kind of otherworldly presence and what was, actually going on in canon. But, this game has a lot of ambiguity in its story and how you interpret it. And I've been realizing that more as I've been playing through the Remake on a second playthrough of anything, and as you gain more experience in life, or you know, do more thing, or play more games, read more, whatever, you're gonna start to see more things that you never really thought about or noticed before. And in particular with a fantasy game, a lot of these elements are incorporated, I think, really well into this Remake trilogy, and they have the ability to expand on a lot of these things, right? You know, there's a certain purity to the original Final Fantasy VII. I get that, and we can pull up donkeys like, oh, well, I just walked across this part.
Look at this robot hand. In the PS1 version, I walked over the robot hand in 1 second. In the PS4 version, you have to take control of the robot hand, take your partner, put her up on the cliff.
And it's like, yeah, I think that part with the, like, cranes kind of sucked. And that's kind of the thing with the original Remake. There are parts in Remake. I particularly remember the part in the scientist, what I forget his name, Hojo. The part in Hojo's lab, that part was awful. It took forever. It wasn't fun. But in Rebirth, it's like there's not even need for really much filler because it's just so packed with everything. Why even bother? I would even argue at this point that in terms of what is one of the best games, like in terms of objective quality, I think Rebirth might be number one, honestly. I would honestly debate that. There is some preference there. You have to kind of like the kind of like half RPG, half action combat system where you're swapping between characters. I think for me is just like the perfect kind of style for combat in a third-person action game. You're doing that a lot, right? And I find it extremely fun, right? But there's little things too, right? It's like when you hit the button and when things hit, right? There's a good amount of delay. The enemies have a good amount of difficulty. You're trying to time it so that you are dodging enemies and you're doing these things with high skill, but it's not going to punish you too much. And even if it is, you have other options within the RPG system and other, you know, ways to solve the problem that I think something like Dark Souls doesn't have. That's why I hate Dark Souls. It's literally all just time the button correctly. At least that's what it feels like to me, because that always is what kills me. And it is intentionally deceptive about that, which I think some people are better at and some people enjoy. They like learning the patterns, right? They like, oh, I've observed this, now I can go in and do it, and I learn it. But for me, it's like my intuition is telling me to hit it here, and I get deceived. It's going to take me some time before I get it. And even then, once I get it, it's like I have to not mess up. For somebody like me who's not like a high-skill pro gamer, but I still play a lot of video games, I can pretty much jump into, you know, any single-player game and get through it, just because I understand how games work, and you know, Final Fantasy VII Remake is kind of perfect for that. It kind of has to be that for two reasons. First of all, the original was just a turn-based RPG. Yeah, there was a time constraint, and you know, it was a queue system, so it was a little bit different. I think they were trying to go for the, you know, maybe their vision was something like what Remake is, but they couldn't do it at the time, right? And so they have to accommodate those fans by not making the actual action aspects too hard. And they even have a mode where it's like you can just play this like an RPG, it'll fight for you, because some people just don't like that, which I think is great. I don't have a problem with that, especially, and that leads into reason number two, which is it's narrative based, right? It's narrative based, music based, character based. It's a story. It's as much of a story as it is a game. And if you're into it for that story and the fantasy elements more so than the actual game, right? You know, maybe the game is just an interactive cherry on the cake kind of thing. Then you don't want something that's, in that case, you don't want something that's just too difficult as like your only way to play it. It's pretty rare for these companies to make claims like this, right? Where they're like, it'll be exactly what fans are looking for. That's a very bold move, because if it doesn't perform well, they will look bad. It will be considered a failure, which, not to be racist or anything, but I think in Japanese culture, if you say that this is what you're going to do and then it sucks, like that's kind of a, you know, Nintendo gets the W there, and I do not want that to happen. That's a whole nother video. from what I understand, this underwater section, the kind of section on the mountain, and then the final battle. There might be some more, and then Wu Tai as well. Wu Tai. So they still have some stuff to explore that they are probably going to be putting into this final installment. Yeah, the whole cloud being zombified and sucked into the live stream. They still actually have a lot of stuff to do. It'll be a little bit out of order from the original, but I don't really mind that. You know, it happens over such a vast span of time when you're playing through the remake trilogy. I think that any problems with that probably are not that big of a deal, and I suspect that they're thinking through that a lot anyway. And I haven't really noticed any major plot issues anyway. The whole world blends seamlessly together. Part of why this particular installment of Final Fantasy, I think, resonates with so many people is because of how cohesive the world in it is and how many different things it's able to blend together without anything really breaking anything else, which is, I think, one of the marks of a great fantasy world. Different things combined together that seamlessly work, and it all still makes sense. People are hyped for this, at least on Reddit, right? On r/games, there's a lot of hype. So here's someone who's like, some of the new additions to the story are pretty confusing. As I've gotten older, I've kind of stopped trying to piece every little thing together with these stories, and just kind of assume that if it's confusing, you know, maybe there's something that I'm missing, or on another playthrough, I'll get it. But I've never really felt that there was anything that I personally was, you know, anything that was so out of left field that I just could not play through it. Like, you know, there's a lot of shadowy motivations. A lot of the characters want different things in the game. So it makes sense that there's going to be some confusion, right? Any kind of like, you know, kind of stories where you have, in particular with kind of like the Shinra and Hojo and that whole, and even the Sephiroth kind of plot line, when you're dealing with that kind of corporate strategy combined with, you know, ethereal elements, and then also a scientific plot, like that's going to be somewhat confusing and complicated, and the motivations are not always going to be super clear. I would love to see somebody actually go through and really analyze whether or not the plot of these things makes complete sense. That maybe would be something that I would do in the future, but probably like 5 years from now when I have the time to do it, if I have the time to do it. It's a little bit like what game theory, for whatever reason, like on the game side of things, you don't see that kind of level of scrutiny with plot as much as you do with movies or books. Maybe that's because gamers are more hands-on and interactive and they don't care so much about that kind of thing. I didn't really care about that until I started noticing as a teenager that, oh wow, yeah, a lot of these plot elements are kind of inconsistent. I just never really cared because I just made sense in my head somehow. Half the time I ended up being right though, and I'm like, oh, they just missed something. And that's kind of the thing. You can always figure out a way to make these things make sense. But if the story becomes too disconnected, then it becomes a problem. I don't think that that is the case in this trilogy though, and hopefully the last one isn't too crazy, but I do want it to be at least moderately crazy. Yeah, I would agree with this comment here. The ancient capital in Rebirth, they rushed that. That really is my biggest complaint. They rushed that Aerith section so much. You could just tell they were like, all right, it was paced extremely well for like the entire game, and then it was like, okay, we got to get through this. Right? That was the only problem I had with it. And that's why I like expected that to be part 3. I didn't expect that to be part 2, but I think that maybe there was a constraint from like a higher level in management or something that was like, no, we've already planned to do this in part 2, and it will break our kind of the way we're doing the story or something yeah, that was rushed. And, you know, I think they really wanted to have that scene in there. They wanted to have that song, right? That's really my only complaint. That's what would move this game from like a 10 to a 9, right? I don't think it does. When you're talking about pacing and story like that in a game like this, when most other stories and games are paced pretty terribly, right? You sometimes have to think in terms of relativity with these kind of things, I think. Can't wait to get to the northern crater to fight Sephiroth, and Tifa sees a family of stray cats running off, so we have to spend the next 2 hours finding them all. That's pretty funny, I think. I personally enjoy that kind of thing. I don't know why. I just, if it's fun and I'm like, oh, I'm walking around, I'm looking at the sights, and, you know, maybe there's some monsters along the way. I don't mind that kind of change of scenery every once in a while in these games. It'd be cool if maybe they could incorporate some kind of like dialogue selection where it's like you can choose to make that kind of thing like optional or something, but then you lose relationship points. Maybe they could do something like that, you know? It's like, do you want to do this side thing? Yes. Boom, you get relationship date points. You don't, and maybe that could impact the, you know, the famous ending kind of scene in Final Fantasy VII with not really a scene, but an implication with Cloud and Tifa, right? It could affect that. It's like, if you want that, man, you're gonna have to collect the cats. Wait, wasn't the story complete in 1997 though? Well, yes, but I think the game was such a monumental success and resonated with so many people and had a lot more, the world had so much more potential that to not make something like this out of it, I think would have been a waste. If you prefer the original, that's fine. It's always going to be there. And if it isn't, it needs to be preserved as much as possible, right? I mean, preserving the past is, and that's a whole nother discussion, but like, I imagine what the vision of what Final Fantasy VII was when they were doing concept art and exploring the world and planning it all out, and then being constrained by what you could do with the PlayStation 1. I almost imagine that as being kind of like a prototype, almost like a first draft, which is going to sound like blasphemy because I know a lot of people tend to be original game purists, but I really personally feel that the remake trilogy may actually be closer to what the story should be and how it should be told. Just and that could be also just my preference for higher fidelity and higher production, but I think that it's a story that deserves that level of polish and level of care and money put into it. FF7 Remake is not really a remake, it's a sequel disguised as one, and each of the games have a lot of additional story content. When we're thinking of a game like this that's narratively based, I think we need to think of them more like movies. In movie terms, we would call it a reboot. You know, in movies, sometimes they will remake a movie, right, with new characters, or remake a movie with new cast. Maybe they'll change the story a little bit, but fundamentally it's the same thing. Remake is a reboot in that sense. It's the same thing with stuff added because of improvements in technology and budget and stuff like that. So I'm going to address now what this was kind of supposed to be about in the first place, which is the next one going to suck? My strong suspicion is no. When you have two hits in a row, and then, you know, this is kind of gamblers, maybe fallacy or something, but the idea that this third installment, after they've basically mastered, you know, they've figured out the engine, they've figured out kind of a formula for how to make it and how to structure it, the idea that they're not going to be putting as much effort as possible into the narrative and production quality and the gameplay and making it as smooth as humanly possible is extremely unlikely. It's probably going to be a very good game. Is it going to be one of the best games of all time? Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I would say you would want to group all of the three games together, right? That as one thing. I could say that maybe is arguably one of the best games of all time. Is it going to be better than Rebirth? The beginning and the middle are my favorite part of Final Fantasy VII. In the original Final Fantasy VII, I think the Midgar section is much better than the rest of the game, with a few exceptions. I actually kind of liked that it was more of a constraint. Like, it was still, you could walk around, but the whole map was kind of like set up. They had the whole environment. And then you get to the open world and it's like, this is a low-res dot. Like, why is this even here? Like, why am I walking across this? Right? Outside of a few puzzles, it's really janky and it kind of looks like shit, if I'm going to be honest. I'm sorry. The FF7 overworld looks like shit in the OG. I'm just gonna say it. But in Rebirth, the middle is like amazing. They took the sections that really made it shine, and in addition to completely living up to what those needed to be, made the rest of the thing incredible. One thing that I kind of am annoyed by, though, with this series is having to fight Sephiroth at the end of every game. Was that really a necessary choice? Could they not have saved that? I can see doing it in the first one because it's like, well, what if it does poorly and now they don't make the rest of it? It's like, then there's no Sephiroth fight. And, you know, the way that they did the story in the first one, they could have ended it at the end of, kind of the end of Midgar if they wanted it to, make it one of those open-ended stories. But I think that in the third one that's coming up, I don't know if that fight is going to be as impactful because they've put a lot of effort into the fights in the first one and now in Rebirth. And is the Sephiroth fight really going to be all that great? They're going to have to do something with Sephiroth's famous attack, right? I'm really excited to see that, to see how long that takes, if it'll actually be 3 minutes, and if you have to watch it each time. I kind of hope they do that, actually, because I think that is kind of an integral part of the original experience. Playing through that original RPG and getting to the point where I'm at that boss fight and I'm seeing that and realizing that, first of all, seeing that for the first time was incredible. I was like, I can't believe that they did this. I can't believe that they did this crazy attack, and I'm going to have to watch it every time, right? It was such a good bit for me that I didn't even care that I had to see it each time. And it was cool watching it, too. It's like kind of charming. Bad graphics can be charming, right? Overworld in that game, dog shit. Cutscene in the final boss fight with those graphics, incredible. The game will probably be very good, at least. I'm like 100% sure that it's going to be a very good game. I don't know if it's going to be perfect. I don't know if it's going to surpass Rebirth in terms of quality. I think for the people who already don't like the Rebirth trilogy or the Remake trilogy all that much, they're going to dislike it and complain about it, as they always have. But if you're like me and you've been appreciating the insane level of craftsmanship and care and the beauty and the way and the gameplay, I mean, oh my god, right? I think that it's very unlikely that if you're like that this is going to be something that you will ever could possibly think would be a bad game. And if it is, it will be one of the biggest disappointments, I think, of that year. And people will be talking about it forever.